The next item on our agenda is detailed site plan, docket number 17-18. I would like to mention that this is the detailed site plan, so we're here to discuss what it's going to be like moving forward. It's not, is this going to go through, yes or no? This is what is going through and what is proposed at this time. Sir?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For the record, Frank Stevens of the City Planning Staff here tonight to review with you docket number case 1718, a detailed site plan for the Aspen multifamily residential project at the Melford Town Center. This first slide is a general location map of the entire Melford property, once known as the Maryland Science and Technology Center, located in the northeastern quadrant of U.S. routes 30150 and Maryland Route 3 to the west. This slide also identifies a general location of the subject property. That's the subject of tonight's hearing. This next slide is a more specific location slide showing the property within the Melford community. To the south down here are routes 5301, and over to the west is Maryland Route 3. This is Melford Boulevard in through here, the traffic circle, and Curie Drive traveling north-south to the east of the subject property, which consists of about 6.6 acres. The site will have frontage on a future east-west boulevard located to the south of the property. To the north of the property is the existing stormwater management pond owned by the city, as well as a city trail that runs around that stormwater feature. To the west of the property is the Melford Cemetery. To the south, across future east-west boulevard, is the Melford House. And on the east side of Curie Drive will be some future development. This is the detailed site plan of the property. The proposal is for 388 dwelling units in a 4 to 5 story building and a 5-story parking deck for 583 vehicles. There are also 4 parking spaces proposed out front of the building. This is the main entrance in this location. To the east is Curie Drive, and to the south is the future east-west boulevard. This feature over here to the west is a fire lane that connects from east-west boulevard to Curie Drive. There is a trail proposed off of that fire lane to connect to the city trail around the stormwater pond, and there's a mulch trail that's proposed from the fire lane to the cemetery. This shaded area within the building is the parking structure. The lighter shaded areas are the multifamily building itself. To the south, in this open courtyard area, is a proposed in-ground pool, and to the north, within this courtyard area, is a Zen garden, which is a passive recreational feature with some walkways and other amenities that we can show you in a couple slides down. At the intersection is a proposed open plaza. The driveway in front of the building is an in-out one-way driveway entering off of Curie Drive and exiting onto the future east-west boulevard. The analysis of the detailed site plan begins on page 5 of our report, where we identify the purposes of a detailed site plan identified in section 27281C1 of the zoning ordinance. And we also identified the finding that needs to be made to approve a detailed site plan that's set forth in section 27285B of the zoning ordinance. And we've also discussed the Melford conceptual site plan and design guidelines. On pages 6 and 7 of our report, We talk about the building and site data that are proposed for the building, the access points, which I just reviewed. There's one additional access point. This is the main point into the parking garage off of Curie Drive. It's also serves as an access to the service area, trash area, and loading dock area for the building. This slide indicates the proposed outdoor swimming pool. To the bottom of the slide is the future East-West Boulevard. You can see the open courtyard in this area. This is a micro bioretention area, as well as this feature over here. The water surface of the pool is this white area surrounded by a deck. There are two outbuildings that are proposed on the fringe of the deck space. To the right over here are two grill areas that are proposed with trellis. There are benches proposed in this area, and there's substantial landscaping proposed around the perimeter of this area as well as within the courtyard area. This is an emergency vehicle access driveway that leads from East-West Boulevard into this area in case it's needed. This slide shows the Zen Garden on the northern side of the building. Again, the open courtyard. The city's trail is up here, and stormwater pond. This is the fire lane around the northern and western sides of the property. And this garden has substantial planting, two grills, walkways, trellises, benches, and substantial landscaping, as well as several micro bioretention facilities. And this is an enlargement of the proposed plaza area at the intersection of Curie Drive and the future East-West Boulevard. This is the one-way access from Curie into the front of the building and exiting onto East-West Boulevard. It shows 4 parking spaces in front of the building main entrance that are for temporary short-term parking. The plaza area will include several types of shade trees, lighting features, benches, and a fountain, which is located at the corner. And this slide indicates the details of those features within that plaza area, the fountain, and these two details, the plaza area lighting and the benches that are proposed. This slide is a perspective view that kind of captures the whole site with specific focus on the plaza area and how it relates to the intersection of the two streets and the front of the building. You can see that there is a monument sign proposed in this location at the exit, as well as one behind this tree at the entrance, and we have another slide further down that shows those features more clearly. But this is the main entrance to the building right here. Over in this location, behind this wall, is the entrance to the parking garage. And again, this is meant to show if you're standing in the middle of the intersection of the two streets and looking straight at the building entrance, you can kind of capture the whole front of the building as well as the plaza area and the landscaping that's proposed in that area. We talk about the elevations of the building that are shown here on page 9 in our report. There's a variety of building materials and features that are described in the report. This southern elevation at the top would face the future East-West Boulevard. This is the area in here where the swimming pool would be. The main entrance is over in this location, and on the western side you'd find the fire lane. This tower architectural feature and in the northwestern corner of the building includes some signage identifying the name and the logo for the project. The elevation at the bottom of this page is the eastern elevation facing Curie Drive, and you can see the main entrance to the building at this location. And these doors are doors to the service area as well as to the parking deck. This is the northern elevation at the top. In this area would be the Zen Garden. The northwest corner of the building includes the architectural signage feature. And the western elevation would be facing the part of the stormwater pond as well as the Melford Cemetery. But you can see in these four elevation views the materials that are proposed with two different colors of brick, cementitious siding, the types of roofing that are proposed, and the window treatments. This slide is the first of four that shows the features on the first level of the building. This is the northern portion of the building. This would be the Zen Garden in here. This is the entrance into the parking level. This is the first level of the parking deck. This area includes residential storage, trash and recycling storage area, interior bike storage, pet spa. There's a outdoor dog walk, enclosed dog walk proposed in this vicinity here. This slide is of level 2, which includes the several types of units that are proposed within the project. It shows in orange different amenities that are provided on this level, including a small theater, a leasing area, a mail delivery drop-off area, a fitness center, community room, business center for residents, and a game room. This slide indicates the proposal for levels 3 and 4. They're identical to each other in terms of the layout with both the types and locations of units as well as the parking structure. And finally, level 5, this is the southern area down here. This would be looking down onto the outdoor pool and the buildings, or the units in this portion of the building, and the level 5 parking structure. This is the landscape plan which we discussed on page 10 of our report. There are about 22 varieties of different type of landscape materials, including shade and ornamental and evergreen trees, deciduous and evergreen shrubs, perennial plants, and ornamental grasses. It gives you an idea of the heavy landscaping that's proposed within the Zen Garden area, as well as around the pool area and the perimeter of the property. The 13 microbial retention areas will be landscaped as well with ornamental grasses. This slide is a perspective view of the building entrance, and we're using it for identification of the types of signage that are proposed with the project. There's this building-mounted project ID sign located above the building entrance, and over here in the bottom right is a monument, brick monument sign that's proposed at the entrance to the one-way driveway in front of the building. And we talk about the signage on pages 11 and 12 of our report. And the last slide is the second monument sign that's proposed at the exit of the one-way drive onto East-West Boulevard. We also discuss on page 12 of the report the Stormwater Management Concept Plan, which has been reviewed and approved by the city. It's valid until March 20th of 2020, and it includes, as I mentioned earlier, the locations and the landscaping of the 13 microbiota retention facilities located throughout the property. On page 13, we talk about the woodland conservation. There are 75 acres that are provided in woodland conservation on the entire site, and the TCP plans 1 and 2 are in place for the entire site. On page 13 of our report, we talk about the conformance with the master plan, and based on the discussion in our report, the Melford development conforms to the area master plan. And finally, on pages 14 and 15, we address the recommendation for approval as well as the conditions. We find that with the conditions set forth, that the project will meet the findings for approval established in the zoning ordinance, and that the proposed detailed site plan represents a reasonable alternative for satisfying site design guidelines without requiring unreasonable costs and without detracting substantially from the utility of the proposed development for its intended use. So we're recommending the conditions listed on pages 14 and 15, which are intended to improve the site and building aesthetics and to conform to the adopted Melford Design Guidelines and the city's development review guidelines and policies. That concludes the staff presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Stevens. Anyone from St. John's that would like to come up and make a presentation? Good evening.
Good evening.
How are you?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the board. For the record, Robert Antonetti of the law firm of Shipley & Horn, here on behalf of St. John Properties, Inc. Pleased to be here again before you to discuss the first residential building within the Melford project. I do have our design team here tonight. I am representative of the applicant. I have Mr. Andrew Rao, regional partner with St. John Properties. I have Mr. Mike Carruthers with Somerset Construction, partner with St. John on the development of these buildings. I have Mr. Peter Follott, the architect, who will also speak briefly after me to go over some of the aspects of the architecture of the building. I have Mr. Ken Finley from St. John Properties, Ms. Jennifer Hearn from St. John as well. We also have Mr. Chris Rizzi and Nick Speech from Bowler Engineering, the civil engineering company for the Melford project. So we're all here to answer any of your questions. I'm going to give an initial orientation. And then Mr. Follott, if is okay, we give a brief slide presentation to build on what Mr. Stevens has presented. I do want to thank the staff, the planning staff, for their presentation tonight and for their thoroughness on their staff report. They're a very professional group. It's always been a pleasure to work with them. They're tough on applicants, but at the end of the day, I think we come up with compromises where appropriate and ultimately the best projects for the city of Bowie and for this case, the Melford development overall. Just to go back a little bit on the history and why we're here and why we're able to be here. As you know, Melford is was formerly the University of Maryland Science and Technology Center. It's governed by a series of covenants and an annexation agreement which brought the property into the city of Bowie. In exchange for rezoning and other infrastructure concessions, the project owners at the time, before St. John owned it, agreed to be subject to a series of covenants. Those covenants restricted the uses on the property. They did not allow a mix of uses in terms of residential uses. That was until 2013. In 2013, after almost several years of negotiations, which came before various city committees, even came before this body for a recommendation, ultimately the city and the developer agreed to amend the covenants to allow for a mix of uses within the center, essentially the center undeveloped portions of the overall Melford project. That mix of uses included up to 2,500 residential units, as well as several 100,000 square feet of commercial development, both retail and office development. Moving forward, in 2014, this is just a brief important point, the Prince George's County Council approved the 2014 general plan, also known as Prince George's 2035. That's significant because it created a series of center designations throughout the county that were intended to receive the majority development, future development within the county, both residential and commercial development. Melford was brought into a local town center designated for Bowie called the Bowie Local Town Center. That's significant because it created an expectation for significant growth, including and not limited to residential development of 10 to 60 dwelling units per acre. In 2015, consistent with the covenants that were approved in 2013, the applicant, St. John Properties, came before the city of Bowie, this board as well as the city council, and sought approval of a conceptual site plan at the time known as Melford Village. Now it's branded as the Melford Town Center. But the Melford Village concept, which this building is a part of, included, again, up to 2,500 residential units, of which 1,000 were allowed to be senior age-restricted units. It also included several hundred thousand square feet of office, as well as up to 268,000 square feet of retail. In 2017, somewhat recently, this board also saw a preliminary plan of subdivision. That's the next step in the zoning process. The preliminary plan of subdivision was for 1,793 residential units. So the numbers come down from 2,500 originally conceived in the covenants and the conceptual site plan, but 1,793 is the residential unit count, of which this detailed site plan fits within that number. There was also approval of 124,500 square feet of retail space within kind of the Melford Town Center boundaries that we're now calling it, and up to 235,000 square feet of commercial office. Tonight we're here for a detailed site plan for about 6.61 acres of that total acreage within the Melford Town Center approval that was shown in the conceptual site plan and preliminary plan of subdivision. Of that is 388 residential units in a wrap building. A wrap building is a defined building type that was part of the Melford Village at the time design guidelines, which is the first page is shown on the overall picture there. Ken, if you could advance to the next slide, please. Again, tracking with the chronology here, the conceptual site plan is up on the screen, and what it is essentially a bubble plan. It showed how the Melford Village, Melford Town Center project was to develop and the different use types that were allowed. Where the Aspen building, which is what we're calling this proposed residential building, is shown, it was designated for multifamily units, and that's what we're showing, 388 multifamily units in the form of a wrap residential building with a structured parking garage in the middle, not surface parked, but structured parking, and it's all meant to be supportive of the sustainable model that this town center was design guidelines were focused on. Essentially is compact development, reduction of impervious surfaces by having multi-story buildings with structured parking as opposed to surface parking. So you get that 388 unit plus 388 unit building surrounding the 583 parking space structure parking level. So it's quite a compact, sustainable project, which essentially reduces impervious surfaces. Ken, if you go to the next slide. Again, just going down the history here, this is the illustrative site plan that was approved in 2017 that was shown to this board and approved by the planning board, the county planning board, ultimately. What's dotted in red here is the Aspen footprint. This was, again, approved with the preliminary plan of subdivision. As you see, the two view corridors, which were important organizing elements for the design guidelines, those are views from the historic house, one down towards the river, the other one showing the historic Duckett family cemetery. And as we're not allowed to build buildings in that view corridor heading to the north in particular, and this illustrative site plan, respects that. If we can go to the next slide, Ken, please. So here we have the Aspen building, and I'll let Mr. Follott speak to it specifically. What you see here are essentially, four corners of the 6.61 acre lot. That's what this detailed site plan is about. It's about the four corners of this, what the improvements shown within the four corners of the lot, nothing more, nothing less. how that building within the four corners of the Aspen lot, how that conforms to the design guidelines both in the zoning ordinance in section 27274, as well as the design guidelines that were approved with the conceptual site plan. City staff and the statement of justification that accompanied this application clearly demonstrates conformance with those two design guideline elements. It also shows conformance with the previous conditions of approval that came forth in the conceptual site plan and the preliminary plan of subdivision. We meet all the criteria for approval pursuant to the zoning ordinance for a detailed site plan. That's essentially the application, and that's the point of analysis I would suggest to the board that needs to be focused on. What isn't subject to this detailed site plan are several things that we heard at the stakeholders meeting. Comments that we've heard historically for the Melford project as it's evolved from a single, somewhat struggling office park to a planned mixed-use project. It focuses heavily on the questions we heard at the stakeholders meeting included many different things, but some of the more common themes we heard that we've heard on other applications is traffic. What's the impact to traffic in the region? I think we had a pretty thorough discussion during the stakeholders meeting, and we did that deliberately to bring that forward there and not to bring it to this board or to the city council, because that's not a focus of this detailed site plan. We're focused on the appearance of the building, the architecture of the building, the amenities, and how it fits with the criteria of approval for detailed site plans. Another thing that came up during that stakeholders meeting, it's come up in the past, is the single access point in and out of the project. The reality of the situation is the project has one point in and out on Melford Boulevard. It's a significantly wide access point in and out with a significantly wide median. The criticism that the project has gotten from some folks in the past and at the stakeholders meeting was if there's a catastrophic accident, there won't be the opportunity for emergency vehicles to come in and out. Back in 2014, although it's not a requirement and it's a point of analysis for this detailed site plan, I did want to go back and submit back into the record a letter that was received from the fire chief at the time, Mark Mashur, and dated March 31st, 2014, which goes into the access, speaks clearly that the access point from the fire department standpoint is adequate, that in the event of a catastrophic event where they have to close a side, the median and the pavement that's out there is wide enough to allow the opportunities not only to reroute traffic, but to reroute emergency vehicles as necessary. So nobody wants to see that happen, but in the event that there's something that would happen to that extent, there's opportunities to allow for the ingress and egress of traffic as needed until that temporal situation is resolved. So if I could just hand a few copies of that out, just for the record. Oh, one more here. Apologize for that. Yes, right here. I'm sorry. Apologize. So, I'll let Mr. Follott talk to the architecture here, but we're excited to be here. We're excited to bring forth, again, the first residential building, which is, at the time we proposed the conceptual site plan, the covenants, we thought these wrap buildings were going to be one of the last types of buildings to come online. We didn't think the market necessarily would support that right out of the gate. Fortunately for us, we had the opportunity to bring this exciting, sustainable, compact building as the first residential building, other than the Thrive Assisted Living Facility, the first residential building as part of this Melford Town Center project. So we're very excited about that. I will say that what you do see around here, the garage, which is for residents. It's parked at 1.5 spaces per unit. There are no 3-bedroom units in this facility. There's mostly 1- and 2-bedroom units. And we think that it does park at the parking ratios approved in the design guidelines. In fact, we provide one more space than the requirement in the garage itself. We are agreeing with the city staff's recommendation to provide 4 spaces along the front entry point. So in essence, we'd be providing 587 spaces in total. But what's this doesn't show is necessarily, and Mr. Flatt will speak to it as we go through the slides, is the opportunity for on-street parking. Again, as a mixed-use project, there's going to be a variety of users, a variety of use types, and the opportunity to park throughout the project on the street is not only a great traffic calming measure, but it's a great opportunity to activate the street and to give places for people to park their vehicles when they visit residents in this building in particular. We believe there's, gosh, over 130 on-street parking spaces within a 2-minute walk that are planned within the Melford Town Center. So there's adequate parking for guests or people looking to come to the Aspen other than the spaces for the residents within the garage. So again, I just wanted to focus through the history walk here. I apologize for taking too long, but again, I just wanted to emphasize that, again, we are here to evaluate the detailed site plan criteria that's required in the zoning ordinance. It's the 4 corners of this project. It's not the public facilities test for transportation. It's not the width of the access point coming into the project. It is a single access point, but those things were vetted, processed, and ultimately approved as part of the previous entitlement approvals. So framing it in that discussion in that way, I'd like to turn it over to Mr. Flatt unless there's any questions of me at this point. I appreciate your consideration of this request, and if I could bring up Mr. Flatt, we can go right into our slideshow.
Thank you. Good evening. Thanks for allowing me a couple minutes here to talk about the project. Very excited to be here, very excited about the project. This building is a large building, and it is a very highly designed building. These buildings, you can see one of these buildings at Annapolis Junction. Yeah, so you've seen, if you go inside of it, it's spectacular in its grandiosity. The public spaces are fantastic. They're very much like a resort hotel, and they're very well received by the public. They rent up really well. And there's a couple reasons, and it's really a building that's highly amenitized. It starts with the parking garage. The parking being centrally located in the building like this allows all residents to be very close to their parking space. And the garage being a garage, am I got this one? No, just you. Huh? Can I get that? You want to drive? Yeah, if I can. I'll drive left-handed. It allows people to park on the floor that they live in and kind of have a very simple, quick walk to their units. They're not directly accessed, they're accessed in the corners here and there, and we'll look at the plan. But this plan is a really good way to look at it. The building, as you can see, is a pretty good sized footprint, but the way we break the architecture down is we try to create one sort of larger volume that surrounds the garage, and then we break it down into wings that creates sort of breaks the big mass into a third, okay? And the same sort of thing here, there's a wing, space, and a wing, thirds, thirds, thirds. And then from there, we break the corner of these into tower elements and sort of breaking down that piece. And then the long facades, we break them down into a series of sort of vertical treatments. So the building, although it's large, it breaks down in scale and becomes almost like a townhouse type of environment once you move through the architecture. And so that's the basic planning. The wings, of course, surround these fantastic amenity spaces because the building is large. These amenity spaces are large. So it's a very comfortable space. That's a really big swimming pool. The Zen garden is a really nice place to be Zen or throw a Frisbee. And then there's areas in the corners of the building such as this. This is a dog park, dog walking area, a small pen, and then obviously, and there's a dog washing area here, so there's an amenity for that. And then the main entrance of the building creates this kind of beautiful front porte cochere. It opens out into this public plaza with a fountain that could be, you know, a really great, greatly programmed space in the heart of Melford. So let's see if I'm, all right, did I go backwards? Yeah, all right. So these plans are a little bit difficult to understand because the building is built into a hill. This is the hillside. The lowest level here is actually connected to the parking. This is the entrance to the parking here. This is the bike storage and dog walking area here. And then this is a storage area here for residents. Also, the storage is kind of next to the garage and built into the ground, so it doesn't need light. Right. This is the ground floor plan showing both the entrance to the building. This is, again, is the plaza. The main lobby is here. The community space, which when you, if and when, and I do recommend you go to Annapolis Junction, you enter the front building, you come into a really nice lobby that's 2 stories. You walk into a community room that is another grand space with pool tables and bars and a really fantastic amenity. And then from there, you look right out at the pool. And it's just this really kind of welcoming, the kind of series of spaces that makes you want to stay. There's a nice fitness center that opens off to this side. There's a movie theater and a really great mail room that has wrapping stations and places for people to collect their packages that come via Amazon. Leasing office is located here. The plan here, the colors of the plan represent the sort of bright color are studio apartments, the medium color are 1-bedrooms, and then the sort of light green is a 2-bedroom unit. A typical floor plan basically follows the floor plan below, but over top of the amenity spaces are units. Okay, so here we get down to the architecture of the building and what I was talking about before. It's a little bit hard to read, but you can see that there's basically a main central portion of the building. There's a wing and a wing. Each of the corners of the building articulated with little towers. And then each of the individual parts are sort of broken down by a series of townhouse elements or grand villa or whatever you sort of architecture you want to call them. The masonry is throughout the base of the building. The towers are articulated with 3 stories of masonry, which sort of recall the scale of the Melford house. The towers and the tops of the townhouses are also articulated with a red standing seam roof that is taken from the Melford house standing seam roof. And again, you can see there's a simple cadence throughout the whole building. This is the north elevation and the west elevation of the building. So you can see that we've really tried very hard to break down the scale of the building, make it feel like it's a collection of buildings, not just one large building. And although you're looking at a drawing in 3 dimensions, you really get the feel for it. In the corner of the building, in the northwest corner, there is a tall tower element that is intended to be a marker for the project in the town center. It'll have some signage up there. This is a little diagram that shows how the tower is approximately 100 feet tall, but it's still pretty much in scale. The top of the upper portion of the site is about 85 feet. The lower portion is about 65 feet. And then you can see how the building sort of breaks down. The scale of the base is 11 feet here at the bottom. This is a little a view. The building actually does kind of line up with the Melford house on the west facade, and some of the datums of this roof line sort of carry across and into the massing of the building across the street. This is, again, the south courtyard, the north courtyard, and you can see there's the garage being hid in the middle. This is a view standing in front of the Melford house. looking down and sort of seeing how the buildings kind of relate to each other. These are not steps in the land, they're just sort of abstractions of topography. And then the last view we wanted to share with you is to show how the building sort of fits in the design of the major point of the master plan, where the view corridor from the Melford House to the cemetery to the stormwater management pond, which is really a lake and really does feel like that. The building sort of tucks itself behind it. It does sort of have a little exclamation point at the end here that announces the tower around the whole community. But again, we kind of fit into the landscape well. We've articulated the building so that it does feel like a village or a town center type of architecture. And we really appreciate the opportunity to show this to you tonight, and I'm here to answer any questions you may have.
Thank you, sir. Any other presentations?
Oh, is there more? I thought this was the last one. Okay. I'm sorry? Want to talk about these? I'll let you. All right. All right, so I guess earlier today was the last slide, so I apologize if there's more. So a couple images of the interior spaces. The first one is the Zen garden. Like I said before, you know, you realize that you think that everything is small, but when you see it in these images here, you can see there's a lot of living, a lot of breathing space, very beautiful community spaces, almost like a town green, but it's inside of our project. This is the Zen garden. This is a view coming from the stormwater management pond, which is a lake, like I said, and you walk up this sort of Zen garden path, and you're walking back into that space we just saw. This is a view of the swimming pool and the outdoor dining area and the sort of pavilions that face. This is the lobby. The lobby of the hotel, of the building is here, and it's a two-story space. So when you're standing here, you look out and you see this beautiful space. And then, is this the last slide? This is the courtyard at the entrance. And you can see how we may program this with some outdoor sort of market-type facilities. There's the fountain. And, you know, it's really kind of a beautiful civic space. It will be, you know, completed with the next phase, so the design of this semicircular space will come over and be a part of that. You know, it's a great welcoming gesture to Curry Drive, and you know, it's a very simple, easy space to use, but we think it will really be a great magnet. Another view of that looking down, coming closer to the ground. This is east-west over here. This is Curry Drive in the front. And then this is a view of the space in the evening. I think that's the last slide.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Antonetti, anything else?
That's essentially the presentation. Here to answer any questions. There may be some comments from people in the audience.
Yep.
If I had the opportunity to conclude at the end of it, I'd respond to any comments that may be raised.
Yep. For the moment, we'll start with the board to see if we have any
Sure.
questions. Mr. Scotes.
Yeah, Joe, I want to ask you this one first. It's transportation oriented. I know long time ago there was talk about public transportation coming through there. I don't know if is there any kind of, now that we're getting into the actual residential part that was not on the table for so long, is there any mitigation that would be involved, any kind of fund established for public transportation?
Well, Mr. Scotes, they are committed to working with the city. That's something that we've discussed with them. early on when this project was first moving through conceptual site plan. So that is certainly the intent, to continue to try to influence Metro to run their bus lines out here. We know when the site plan was designed, the conceptual site plan, we did a study to make sure that all of the intersection radii will work properly to handle the bus traffic. And so it is the intent to, as the project becomes more populated, that it will eventually justify the routing of a bus up into this project. So I think that answers the general question, and
Yeah. Okay, thank you, Joe. Now, Counselor, obviously, I think the chairman already mentioned something. If anybody is in the audience that's here to object to the project, obviously that, is no longer possible. I applaud your product. Again, the Annapolis Junction project, I've seen it from the footings up. And, the one thing that project has, unfortunately, that you guys don't, or fortunately, is that you're sitting right on a multimodal type of platform. You have light rail that comes through, not light rail, but you have the MARC train that comes through there. You have two public transportation systems coming through there. Pedestrian, obviously, this looks like it's going to be very ped-oriented. Also, if you've paid attention, there are certain groups, a group here in the city of Bowie, that even though you mentioned something about, the transportation and stuff, I would highly, highly recommend to you that you do take that into consideration, even though there probably will be no objection here at this forum. As you go to the city council, I would brace yourself for some strong objection. The recall of a city council person recently was tied into two things. One, the Berman's project, and two, this particular one coming in residential. So a couple things that I would suggest to you is, one, get some trip generation figures if you already have not got those. And the second thing is, I would be in a position to explain to the next forum basically what your marketing demographics are. Obviously, with 1 and 2 bedrooms, you're going to be cutting down on the amount of multifamilies and stuff like that. I would envision that because of the location and because of the product that you're proposing, that your tenants will be more of the upscale type of tenant, probably single, maybe married couples, those type of demographics. But I would probably put that into your presentation, what type of client or what kind of tenant that you're really gearing this to, without obviously becoming into any kind of discrimination of seniors or anything like that.
I appreciate the comments. With regards to that, certainly respect any fair housing laws.
Right.
This is modeled essentially for the millennial population, but it's also something that could be certainly adequate and a great opportunity for seniors anybody who wants to reduce their maintenance obligation, have the opportunity and safety and security of parking in a garage, parking on a garage at the same level as their unit. And you're right, it's not geared for families per se. There's no 3 bedrooms, as I mentioned. The rents will be substantial market rate rents that I think it's going to feel the type of community. It's going to support the employment uses that are out here. It's going to be an attractive opportunity for employees of different users already in the park, and hopefully future coming to the park to live, to work, to shop, kind of in one place. As for the transportation, yes, this has come up. We're certainly aware of the events that have happened recently. And there's other projects which we don't represent, but other projects which may exacerbate some of the issues, maybe some of the misconceptions as to how Melford came to be, how Melford has met its transportation obligation. As I mentioned at the stakeholders meeting, I've mentioned in the past, this applicant, I certainly understand the traffic situation. We're sympathetic to the traffic situation. It's a regional situation. It's not created just by Bowie. It's not created by this project, just by this project. It's something that comes in and out of the county from various different directions. Notwithstanding, Melford, St. John Properties, has built its impact or its mitigation for US 301, Maryland 3. It's also accepted a condition as part of its preliminary plan of subdivision, as you may recall, at Harbor Way to do intersection improvements there, which, again, these won't solve the regional traffic issues, but it will help. It won't change it significantly, but it will certainly mitigate and meet the obligation and exceed the obligation of this particular development. But we are sensitive to that. We're realistic, and we don't want to be dismissive of anybody that has comments about the traffic situation. But as other projects come online, that's kind of beyond the pale of what we can control with, with the Berman projects you mentioned and such. We want to be good neighbors. We want to find ways to make this the best project possible. It is a mix of use here. I know sometimes some people shake their head and say, there's no way that people are going to live and work in the same spot. I've said before, there's no chance that will happen if we don't have opportunities like this where people can do it. We hope that will take off, and that will also result in some trip reduction. Public transportation in the future, these street sections have been designed to accommodate bus. There's opportunities for bus stops as this project develops, as different neighborhoods develop to have that, and that'll be shown in future detailed site plans as we come back to you. So we are sensitive to it. We'll be as prepared as we can. I appreciate the insight in that regard, but we're also very excited to bring this, this very high quality brick, sympathetic Melford design into the Melford.
Yeah, when I think about it, I mean, when you really look at the residential multifamily like this construction in this region, specifically around the Fort Meade area, this is pretty much the prototype that's come out, and it's been very, very successful. 50,000 jobs at Fort Meade. Obviously, we're in the concentric ring to attract those type of folks. Obviously, we would like to attract some of those type of folks, and the tertiary, just the multiplier effect from this product. Okay, this is what I'm saying about the demographics, because more than likely the people that come in here, if it's marketed right, will make sure that the tax base and also, the economic impact will be a very, very positive thing. Finally, sorry taking up so much time, I guess my one question is, I know there's a number of conditions that staff has asked. Just wondering if you accept those.
Yes, we accept both the findings and the recommended conditions.
Okay. Thank you, Councilor.
Thank you.
Mr. Gatto, do you have anything?
Yes, I do. I have a question. One, pertaining to this nice letter from the fire chief saying there's no problem with 2,500 extra vehicles, yes or no? Is this his opinion? Yes or no? Opinion.
Is it his opinion?
As opposed to a study.
It's his position as the fire.
Is it his opinion? Yes? Okay, thank you. So it's not a study. All right.
Well, I didn't say it was a study.
Okay, well, I just want to know whether it was something objective or subjective. Thank you. The other thing was you have residences that need to be set aside for seniors. Is that correct?
In this project, per the covenants, there's a 20% senior proposal.
Okay.
Of the overall units at any one time. This is actually the second development within Melford Town Center area. The Thrive Assisted Living, which is 140 units, is already under construction right now. So this is offered as market, but it's certainly open to any senior age restricted folks, but it will not be age restricted by restriction or agreement.
Right, but my question is, in order to serve the seniors and their growing population, as a matter of fact, many of them can walk. They're invalid. They need services to meet their needs close around them. I don't see anything. I don't see how they can live there. There's nothing nearby for them for pharmaceuticals, food, doctors. I know you have further down the road, but there's nothing to meet the needs. How are they going to live there?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. This is the first building kind of in the core. As you maybe recall from the conceptual site plan, there's a retail village that's planned. That's to meet the retail needs, at least the immediate retail needs of the future population, as well as the employees, restaurants, convenience needs, a place where you can buy your milk and your bread in very close proximity. It'll be shown probably in the next detailed site plan that you'll see here. As for amenities in terms of healthcare amenities for seniors,
Right.
we went through the covenants. We have the good fortune of being surrounded by about 1.5 million square feet of either existing or approved employment uses. There are a great many doctors within a 5-minute walk or a very short drive within
Don't
the
forget,
Melford
many of them
project.
can't walk, and they can't walk that
Certainly.
far. I do know you do have a lot of good doctors in that area. I go to some of them.
Sure.
But,
And
yes.
but in Melford
Right.
specifically. So, we think I hate using the word synergy, it's somewhat obnoxious, but there's a lot of connectivity there that allows for the opportunity, that could make this an attractive for some people in the senior population. I'm not saying it's for everybody, but, it's certainly there as an offering.
And one last thing is, you mentioned the traffic. The traffic is a big sore spot with me because I live right down the road, okay? So when you talk about the regional traffic, we don't think of it as regional. We think of it as personal. It affects us personally. Just want you to know, you should tap into that perspective as well. Thank you.
No, thank you, I appreciate it.
Mr. Rogers.
Yeah, just one question. Staff, Joe, just to, clear the record, on the the front sheet of our package, we've identified 389 units, and I think we're actually 388, so it's just a technical, probably typo that we need to correct for the record. Council, on the materials used on the exterior of the building, I know we have brick facade, brick on the front. On some of the interiors, is that a hardy plank type
Yes.
material?
Yes, it is. It's the Hardy Plank, which is a particular brand, but it's the
Right.
cement fiber board,
So it's basically maintenance-free exterior?
Correct.
From that perspective?
Correct, yes. Thank you for that clarification.
All right, good. No other questions?
Thank you.
I do have one. Perhaps I overheard it or didn't hear it at all. Were there any assigned parking for the residents?
There is not assigned parking, but given the way the structured parking works and the ability to walk off to your level, the folks that live on a certain level, and since it's only for residents, they're going to park on their level. I will say, in addition to the handicap spaces that are within the garage, there's the opportunity, and I think it's even a state law, that if somebody needed a special accommodation to have a reserved space on their floor, that accommodation can be made. So again, that's something that would hopefully cater to folks with limited mobility and have the opportunity to utilize this facility. So,
Any other questions? Thank you.
thank you.
I'm sure we have some folks sign up to speak. Just two, thank you, sir. All right. Courtney Sohada, sorry. Good evening, ma'am, how are you? Come on up, you'll have 3 minutes to speak. Please state your name and your address for the record, please.
Sure. Courtney Sahida, 12609 Buckingham Drive, Bowie. Appreciate the time. Obviously, this is a development that's been going on for some time, and I guess my concern that I'd like to express to you as the council is that it's in piecemeal. We've heard tonight that we don't know the public transportation. We've heard that, there's elderly people there that they might not have a place to get their medicine. How are they getting that? Where are these people going to travel to? They're going to come right through my neighborhood, Buckingham Drive. They're going to come down Bel Air. They're going to come down Stony Brook. Those are the most utilized pass-throughs that go to the marketplace, which is the place that they're going to go to get their products, their food, and whatever's missing from the community as it's being built. So I guess I'd ask that the council consider that. I know that it can't be a no at this time, and I don't know, so you can't recommend no at this time? Is that what you're saying to
We're
them?
well beyond that point.
Okay. So I would say the other part is that the roadways there, in consideration for the traffic, I mean, we've looked at those traffic studies. I know that there's some enhancements that they're going to do, but it's outside of Bowie's hands. So I think that there needs to be a very strong recommendation on those thoroughways that come down 50 and out to 301, which are not in Bowie's purview, that perhaps this area is only routed to those and not through our neighborhoods. I don't know if that's a consideration that could be added so that they're not able to come through the actual neighborhood. They would have to go out and be dispersed amongst the corridor of 301 or 50, even potentially a 50 exit that would allow them in and out of just that particular area because of the large amount of property and space that's going to be taken up over time. Just trying to forethink how we can add those to the consideration there. I think the other thing for me as a resident of Bowie is the environmental impact. The trees are going to come down. So what that does is it causes more noise for us in our area. I know that there's some landscaping and evaluation that was done on that, but that is also a concern. How's it going to impact me over in the Levitt area? I know that there's noise now that we can already hear. I'm just trying to go through my notes. I really wasn't prepared to speak, but no one else spoke, so I felt like I should stand up. So I went through the totality. The other consideration is perhaps these could be condos and not rental apartments. Is there some consideration that can be given to that? That allows people to give more to their community if they own the property rather than renting it. I don't know if that's something that could be added. Again, I think the larger problem is the piecemeal of the buildings. We've talked about that. What is the ultimate plan for it? Continues to change, and residents, as you can see, are they try to attend, but I mean it's been over a period of years. So if someone didn't speak up first, now we're already into it. How do we stop that? How do we put some considerations in there as the project continues to grow? So I would ask you as council members to consider that. The other thing I wanted to add is that I know that we have one space that's open. There seems to be 2 council members that aren't here now. I know that it's on the 16th is the date. So is there some consideration that will be given to that to fill the one spot that's empty, along with the attendance?
Just real quick, this is the advisory planning board. We're not
Right.
the actual city council.
Okay, I understand that.
So
but
we make
Is
recommendations.
there something that you can make a recommendation to the council?
We do, we make recommendations to the city council. That's what us as volunteers, as
Right.
this board do. We are short a few people. We do have enough for a quorum this evening, so therefore, this will be an official meeting.
Right, not for this one, for the 16th,
Right, that's
because
something
people will not be
separate.
in place by then.
That's something separate and not in our hands.
Okay, so there's nothing that you can do to recommend that? Okay. All right, that's really all I had. Thank you.
Thank you. Martha Ainsworth. Good evening, Ms. Ainsworth. Hi. You'll have 3 minutes. Just please state your name and address for the record, please.
I think I'm the last speaker, actually, right?
Yes, ma'am.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
I only had a chance to look at this today. I was away for the stakeholder meeting, so let me just start out by saying that I'm not going to recommend approval of the plan. I think it's based on an illegal conceptual site plan that's under litigation at the Court of Special Appeals, and an illegal preliminary plan that's going to be heard before the Circuit Court a week from this Friday in Upper Marlboro. So putting that aside, though, I still have some comments about the plan. As one of those volunteers who reads all these things just like you do. The first point that I noticed is that this has become the Melford Town Center. The applicant calls the detailed site plan the Aspen at Melford Town Center, formerly Melford Village. He asserts that the planning board approved the preliminary plan for the Melford Town Center project and discusses the town center boundaries, the Melford Town Center boundaries. Now, as you know, Plan 2035, which is the 2014 general plan, designated 5 areas in the whole county as local town centers, and one was Bowie. And that includes the Bowie Town Center Shopping Center, the Gateway area, Gateway Plaza, and this Melford property. Now this is more from Melford Village as part of Bowie Town Center to naming itself a center into itself. This is a naming thing, but they're going to try to use this in the applications that come along in the future to try to apply the town center guidelines to themselves as a self-standing town center, like a second town center within Bowie. And I just wanted to call, that's very subtle, you may not have noticed it, and I just wanted to point that out, because I think if you approve it with this name nomenclature, you'll essentially be saying that Bowie's okay with that notion that there's a second town center. And it's not costly to fix. So, okay, and the next thing I think you already picked up on a little bit, on the covenants and the age-restricted units. Page 3 of the staff report quotes the Bowie's covenants on the property, saying, quote, "Senior age-restricted housing 55 and older," which includes me, "shall constitute a minimum of 20% of the total residential units contained in the mixed-use parcels." And it goes on to say, "Senior age-restricted units shall at all times consist of at least 20% of the overall residential unit count for the mixed-use parcels." And my recollection is when they approved the covenants, they really intended to have a mix of the 20% within, as you know, as intermingled with the rest of the population as the buildings went. So I kind of expected to see something in here about the number of age-restricted 55 and older units, and I thought you kind of picked up on that already, but I was a little bit surprised that I think it's actually not completely consistent with the covenants the way it is. I also hope that as we go forward, that they'll have cumulative totals of the approved residential units on all the plans. They already agreed that the 140 assisted living units would be counted against the residential, which is good. So we have 140 plus 388, comes to 528. And I point out that's still within what the master plan allows, 866. A lot of the litigation is about the master plan versus the general plan. I'm very pleased to see that they started out with something close to the middle of the development and not over by the edge by the floodplain.
If you could wrap it up, you're about 3.5 minutes.
I'm concerned about, this looks beautiful, it's like Paris. I'm a little bit concerned about the impervious surface here. I don't know what that's made of. It's a way of making it more permeable. And I am a little concerned about the view shed of between the house and the cemetery. I think I actually made a close-up of one of those. I guess I don't have time to talk about it, but let me just say at the very end, because I want to, someone was concerned about that exit, and I know this is not about the exit, but I have now lived, I grew up in the S section of Bowie, went to all the Bowie schools, but I've lived 24 years in Sherwood Manor, and I go out Melford Boulevard every time I go to and from my house, and I have been stuck inside. The emergency vehicles can block the exit. And fortunately, the last time that happened, which was in the last, I think, 18 months it happened, it was the end of the day after all the workers had left. But if you could imagine 2,500 housing units in there, and the emergency vehicle itself was blocking 2.5 lanes of Melford Boulevard. So everyone was kind of like,
Ms.
it was
Ainsworth,
at
I
that first
appreciate your
traffic
comments.
light.
You've long exceeded your 3 minutes. Thank you.
Okay, well, I just wanted to let you know.
Yep, nope, I hear you loud and clear.
Thanks a lot.
Thank you, ma'am. Anyone else that has not signed up to speak that would like to speak? Ma'am, please come up and state your name and your address, please, and then you have 3 minutes. Good evening.
Good evening, my name is Tamika Washington.
If you could speak into the mic, please.
Good evening, my name is Tamika Washington. I'm at 12502 Scarlet Lane, Bowie, Maryland. And I just wanted to come up and say a few words. I know we're past the stage where you guys can make a recommendation, but the things that we've all talked about are very important to us. And I know, like you said, sir, the traffic is very personal to us, so we want to make sure that two things are happening. That the board is looking at the totality of the projects that are coming to Bowie, right? So this is one piece of this very large project, but there's the Marketplace Apartments, there are the Jesuit property apartments that are, or houses that are coming down the line, and all of those units are going to impact how we live and how we move in our neighborhoods. And so I was one of the residents who went door to door over the past year to get Diane Pelagan recalled because we are tired of people not listening to us. And so we are going to hold our council members accountable. And we are going to propose, I know you can't recommend it, but I will be sending an email to the council members that they hold this vote until we get someone in for District 2 seat. And also, my guess is that Courtney Glass will probably step down after her incident. And if she doesn't step down, she needs to step down. So we need to make sure that we have council members here who are here to listen to us and to represent us. And I know that you are not council members, but I wanted to get it on the record that we are concerned and we are going to hold them accountable for all that they promised us. They are here to represent us. And this is a beautiful facility, but who's going to live here? Right? And if they live here, how are they going to move in our neighborhoods? How are they going to get through our streets? How are they going to get to the schools? So we don't have the infrastructure to support this. I think the development projects that are coming down the line are very short-sighted, and they all come in and they make their presentations about their one piece. But we need to look at all of the pieces and see how they all fit together so that it makes sense for all of us, not just for the company that's coming in today or the other developers that are coming in a week from now or a month from now, but how it impacts the residents of the city. And so we need to be accountable. We need to show up to these meetings. We need to ask you to speak out for us. And we need to ask the council members to continue to represent us as we have asked them to. And we will expect them to. And if they do not, we will hold them accountable for. Thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else not signed up that would like to speak, wishes to come forward? Anyone? All right, Mr. Stevens or Mr. Antonetti, do you have any rebuttals or anything you'd like to respond back to?
Again, thank you, Robert Antonetti, on behalf of the applicant. Just on a few of the comments in terms of the trees and the environment, I mean, this project's been designed. This is one piece of many pieces. St. John is the master development of all those pieces that are to come in under the Melford Town Center moniker. This entity developing this project is going to own this facility in terms of ownership versus rental. No, we're not proposing that it be condo. It will be rental. That's what the market wants, but it will be owned, and it's in the interest of the owner to maintain it, to have it look good, to landscape it, to clean it, to keep it a top-notch product, to keep folks wanting to lease there and be part of this growing community. In terms of the court cases, yes, there are cases in court. There's the conceptual site plans under appeal. It's been affirmed by the circuit court. It's been argued in the Court of Special Appeals. It's pending an outcome. The preliminary plan, Ms. Ainsworth and a few folks that she has gotten together, they've appealed that. That'll be argued in the circuit court. That's a process. We're moving forward at our own risk. We understand that it's not a final entitlement until all appeals have been exhausted. But we're confident that no matter what the outcome of any immediate appeal, that the ultimate outcome will support this mix of uses. It's permitted on the underlying zoning. It's supported by the private covenant agreement between the city and the developer. And as part of this detailed site plan, those covenants state that the approval of the detailed site plan can't be unreasonably withheld. So when we got into issues with traffic and transportation, which are personal issues, I'm not going to take that away from anybody who lives in the community. But this applicant has done the best it can in terms of meeting its obligation, in a certain sense exceeding its obligations, in terms of mitigating the impact to the local road network. That is not while that's always an issue in the back of any application, I understand that. But in terms of the criteria of approval for a detailed site plan, that's not an element of evaluation. So if for some reason would be recommended a denial, which I hope the board isn't considering, but if it would be for that reason, that would be, I would think, crossing the line of what would be an unreasonable withholding of a recommendation of approval of this detailed site plan. At the end of the day, we think this is going to be the first piece of a spectacular project. We very much appreciated making the presentation to you. I'm sorry I've run on so long. If you have any questions or further comments of our group, I'm more than happy to answer them.
Yeah. Just want to make sure that we get answers to everybody's concerns on the record. So could you talk a little bit about the naming convention?
Sure. Well, certainly the Melford Town Center, let me make it absolutely clear. The Melford Town Center is in no way meant to supplant a general plan town center designation, which is a term of art, a planning term of art created by the county to designate certain regions. They have regional town centers, local town centers, many different town center types. It's really meant as a local descriptor that the owner and developer feels that it's the best description. It's better than Melford Village. We have a retail village, which is going to come later. We think that as part of it, we want to call this, a town center just for our convenience, our branding, our marketing. We think that makes sense. But in no way is it meant to be confused with the local town center designation of the general plan. It's not meant to create a second local town center. We don't have the ability to do that. That's a planning function of the county council. And again, we're not saying that at all. We fit within the current planning designations. It's really a term of art and preference for this owner, which we feel works well.
Thank you. Staff, any conflict in the naming of it as a Melford Town Center? As you can tell.
No, I don't believe there is. I think, as Mr. Antonetti said, it's more of a marketing, branding situation to give an identity to what's being developed by this developer within the entire Melford community. So I don't think it's a conflict.
Thank you.
I'd just like to say, even though I'm not totally in favor of this whole development idea, I must say that I do like the looks of the quality, and that is a positive thing.
Thank you. I appreciate that. Thank you.
I like one of the points that somebody brought up, looking for the cumulative totals, if maybe you guys can do that along the way. I know we have the senior building and then the Aspen, and then there'll be others to follow. Perhaps, you got 388 here, then that way you could show the total running figure for moving forward, not obviously for this one, but perhaps that way that'll, have it up front for everybody to see, just a suggestion moving forward.
Sure. I'm not sure if that's something we can present, since that's part of the covenant, which is the private agreement between the city. I don't know if that will necessarily be a chart on the detailed site plan moving forward, but certainly as we come here, and since we have to come here,
If you can at least speak about it.
we can speak to that, certainly. With regards to the Thrive Senior Living, if we talk about the 20%, Thrive, the units there are 140 units. Essentially, that gives us the ability to do 700 market rate units, so 20% of 700 is 140. So we're under that, but point taken, and in the future as we come in, we can present updates to kind of the cumulative totals to make sure we're within that 20%.
Yeah, I just think staying transparent with that focal point, I think could, go a long way.
Take it off the table and
Right.
make everybody understand where we're coming from. Great point.
Anyone else?
Thank you.
sir. All right. Mr. Stevens, anything else on your end, sir?
No, sir.
All right. So we can move into deliberations or entertain a motion.
Mr. Chair, I move that we accept the staff recommendation for approval of item number 17-18. And I find that in terms of meeting the requirements of a detailed site plan for this stage of development, that the developer has demonstrated adherence to the requirements of the Bowie detailed site plan requirements. And I think that, having the applicant agree with all of the recommendations of the city council, of the staff report, that the project should move forward.
Mr. Chair, I second that motion, please.
Motion by Mr. Rogers, second by Mr. Scotes. All those in favor say aye.
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 Opposed? None? Of the minutes from the meeting of November 14th, 2017. Please take a look over them, and if you'd like to approve as written, or if you have any modifications. Excuse me, sir. Sir, we're just wrapping up a little bit. If you can just give us a few minutes. You were. Yes.
Move for acceptance.
Move for acceptance. Do I have a second?
Yes, second.
Second by Mr. Scotes. All those in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? No? All right. So we will not get to the election of officers this evening, but I think we will look to move into that in our next meeting. Mr. Reinert, do we have anything in the pipeline coming up?
There are no meetings scheduled currently, so we'll keep in touch with you and let you know as soon as something comes in.
All right. Thank you very much. We will adjourn. Thank you.
For adjournment, so moved.